My name is Diana Chin, and looking back now, I should have trusted that uneasy feeling in my gut when my brother Marcus sent that invitation. The drive from Maine to Fairfield, Connecticut took us nearly 5 hours. 5 hours of my husband Elijah humming along to old jazz records while our daughter Lily sat in the back seat, completely absorbed in her worn copy of Little Women. 5 hours of our son Noah asking every 20 minutes if we were almost there, his excitement about seeing Uncle Marcus practically bouncing off the car windows. Elijah had dressed the way he always did, a soft cotton button-down from Eddie Bauer, comfortable jeans that had molded perfectly to him over the years, and those brown suede boots he'd had resoled 3 times because he swore they finally fit just right. His dark hair was slightly messy from the drive, and he wore that relaxed smile of a man who never pretended to be anything other than exactly who he was. I'd chosen a simple ivory linen blouse and tailored black pants, with my mother's jade earrings. Lily wore a vintage Burberry dress I'd discovered at a consignment shop, soft lavender with delicate lace trim, the kind of craftsmanship you just don't find anymore. Noah had on his favorite button-up and neat khakis, looking like a tiny gentleman, though he'd already managed to untuck his shirt by the time we turned onto the long driveway around 7:30 in the evening. The estate rose before us like something from a magazine spread, stone facade glowing in the twilight, enormous windows blazing with crystal chandeliers, the perfectly manicured lawns stretching out like green velvet. High-end vehicles lined the circular drive, Mercedes, Autos, a Bentley that probably cost more than most people earn in 5 years. Whoa, Noah breathed, his face pressed against the window. Uncle Marcus lives here? He's renting here, sweetheart. I corrected softly, though my stomach was already tightening with anxiety. Elijah said nothing, but I noticed the slight tightening around his eyes as he took in the scene, that observant look he got when he was cataloging details. Most people thought my husband was simply gathering material for his freelance articles about wildlife conservation. I knew better. My husband was always watching, always calculating, though few people ever suspected that the quiet man who introduced himself as a nature writer was anything more than exactly that. We parked between a Porsche and a Range Rover. Our 9-year-old Subaru, dependable and practical, looked like it belonged to the catering staff. The party sprawled across the estate's grand terrace and expansive lawn. Women in designer gowns that probably cost what we spent on rent in 3 months, men in suits so perfectly tailored they looked like they'd been sewn directly onto their bodies. The air smelled of expensive perfume, Dom Perignon, and that particular scent of wealth, that indefinable combination of privilege and exclusivity that makes outsiders feel like they're breathing different air. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. We climbed the stone steps together. Lily's hand found mine, her palm slightly clammy. She was 10 and intuitive enough to sense when she didn't quite belong, though she'd never admit it out loud. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I whispered to her. She squeezed my hand in response, and my heart ached. An event coordinator with an iPad and a smile that never reached her eyes stopped us at the entrance. "Names, please." "Diana Chun. This is my husband, Elijah Brooks, and our children." She scanned her list, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. Not rude exactly, but definitely cooler.
"Ah, yes.
"The main family. Right this way." I felt Elijah's hand settle gently on my lower back as we followed her through the crowd. We passed the VIP area, an elevated section of the terrace with the best view, the best lighting, intimate clusters of cocktail tables draped in champagne silk. That's where I spotted Marcus, my younger brother, holding court in a designer tuxedo I'd never seen before, laughing with a group of people who all looked like they'd stepped out of a Forbes magazine photo shoot. I expected him to see us, to wave us over, to introduce us proudly to his fiancée's circle. We'd driven 5 hours, after all. I'd brought a gift, a rare first-edition book I'd found for Vanessa, something I thought she'd truly appreciate. Instead, Marcus's eyes flickered with something I'd never seen directed at me before. Embarrassment. He glanced at the guests around him, all perfectly polished, all radiating that new money confidence, then back at us in our Eddie Bauer and vintage Burberry. He didn't move toward us. He didn't smile. He just looked away. The coordinator led us past the VIP section, past the main seating area with its strategic proximity to the bar and dance floor, past even the secondary tables. We ended up at a round table tucked in the far corner near the kitchen entrance, where servers rushed past with trays, and the music was muffled by the thick stone wall. The lighting was dimmer here. The view was of the service driveway. This was exile. "Enjoy your evening," the coordinator said, already turning away. Elijah pulled out a chair for me, his movements unhurried and deliberate. He helped Lily into her seat, then Noah. When he finally sat down beside me, he was silent, but I saw his jaw tighten just barely, just enough. "Mom, why are we sitting by the kitchen?" Lily asked quietly, her voice small. "It's perfectly fine, honey. We can see everything from here," I said, my voice bright and false. But we both knew the truth. The seating wasn't random. It was a message. Across the terrace, Marcus laughed at something one of his guests said, champagne flute raised high in a toast. He didn't look our way again. Not once. Elijah leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming once, twice against the linen tablecloth. To anyone watching, he looked completely relaxed, mildly amused by the spectacle around us. But I knew that look. I'd been married to this man for 14 years. He was taking notes. And Elijah Brooks's notes always came with consequences. The party hummed around us, like an exclusive machine we weren't meant to understand. Servers glided past our corner table, barely acknowledging our existence, their trays angled toward the VIP section where laughter sparkled like the champagne. Marcus and his fiancée Vanessa held court under strings of Edison bulbs that cast everything in a warm, flattering glow. Our corner had harsh fluorescent spillover from the kitchen. Noah kicked his feet under the table, still excited despite our banishment. "When do we get to eat? I'm starving." "Soon, buddy," Elijah said, ruffling his hair. He'd maintained that easy demeanor since we sat down, but I noticed he'd positioned his chair at a slight angle, the better to observe the entire party. The writer's eye, people always said. Always watching for material. If only they knew. Movement caught my attention. Vanessa was gliding toward us, her rose gold dress catching light like liquid metal. She was stunning in that calculated way, every hair perfectly placed, makeup applied with surgical precision, jewelry that announced its price without needing words. At 29, she'd perfected the art of looking expensive. She stopped at our table, smile fixed in place like armor. "Diana." Her voice carried that particular tone of false warmth I'd heard before, usually right before someone delivered an insult wrapped in kindness. "I'm so glad you could make it all the way from Maine. It must have been quite the trek." 5 hours, I said evenly. "Not bad at all." "Well, you're braver than me." "I couldn't imagine living so far from civilization," she laughed, a tinkling sound that grated against my nerves. "But I suppose that's the artistic lifestyle, isn't it? Marcus told me you work for an environmental nonprofit. That must be so fulfilling." The way she said fulfilling made it sound like a participation trophy. Elijah's hand found mine under the table, his thumb brushing my knuckles. A silent reminder. Let her talk. "It is," I said simply, refusing to take the bait. Vanessa's gaze swept over our children, lingering on Lily's dress. "And this must be your daughter. What a sweet vintage dress. Very quaint." Lily's smile faltered. At 10, she couldn't quite parse the insult buried in the compliment, but she felt its sharp edge. "It's Burberry," I said, my voice measured and calm. "From the 90s. Better quality than most things made today." "Oh, absolutely. Vintage can be charming." Vanessa's smile sharpened like a knife. "It's just that people here tend to prefer current collections, you know? Fresh from the runway. But there's something to be said for making do with what you have. Very resourceful." Making do. As if we were one step away from a charity shop out of desperation rather than choice. A server appeared at the VIP section with a gleaming tray of canapés. Vanessa excused herself with an elegant wave and returned moments later, shepherding a small group of guests in our direction like a tour guide pointing out curiosities at a zoo. Everyone, this is Diana, Marcus's sister. She gestured at me with her champagne flute. She lives in seclusion up in Maine for artistic inspiration and works for a nonprofit. A life that is, well, very peaceful, but surely a bit removed from our fast-paced world, isn't it? The guests smiled politely, their eyes sliding over us with practiced disinterest. I could read the narrative Vanessa was spinning, the sister who couldn't make it in the real world, who'd fled to the countryside to play at being rustic, who now attended events like this as a reminder of what she'd left behind or failed to achieve. Actually, Elijah said mildly, speaking for the first time since Vanessa arrived, Diana manages complex environmental projects with multiple stakeholders and eight-figure budgets. The nonprofit sector requires quite a bit of pace, just less emphasis on profit margins and more on actual impact. His tone was pleasant, conversational even. But there was steel underneath, the kind that most people missed because Elijah had perfected the art of seeming harmless. Vanessa's smile didn't waver. Of course. Nonprofits are so important. Though I imagine the salary must be quite modest compared to the private sector. But that's the sacrifice one makes for passion, right? She moved on before I could respond, her entourage following like trained pets. Noah tugged on my sleeve. Mom, I'm really hungry. Can I get one of those things they're carrying around? The buffet table had been set up near the VIP zone, a stunning display of delicacies under warming lights. Noah was already sliding out of his chair when Vanessa materialized again, as if summoned by his interest. Oh, Noah. She crouched down to his level, her dress pooling around her like liquid gold. I'm not sure those appetizers are quite right for you, sweetheart. Why not? Noah asked, genuinely confused. Well, they're truffle risotto balls and seared foie gras, very acquired tastes. I'm afraid since you haven't had proper exposure to fine dining, you'll find them hard to appreciate. She tilted her head sympathetically. Tell you what, I'll have the kitchen make something friendlier for you. How about chicken nuggets? Or maybe some pizza. I'm sure you're more comfortable with those at home. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Your family only knows simple fare. You don't belong at this table, literally or figuratively. Noah looked confused. But I like trying new things. No need, Vanessa. I stood, placing my hand on Noah's shoulder. My voice was quiet but firm. The children will eat with their parents. We teach our kids to experience everything. They don't need to be separated or treated differently. For the first time, Vanessa's smile cracked slightly. I was only trying to help. We don't need help, I said, guiding Noah back to his chair. But thank you. Vanessa straightened, her expression cooling several degrees. She glanced at Elijah, perhaps expecting him to contradict me, to apologize for his wife's stubbornness. But Elijah just smiled blandly at her. The way he smiled at everyone, pleasant, forgettable, utterly unreadable. Suit yourself, Vanessa said finally, though her voice had lost its sweet coating. I'd hate for the children to be uncomfortable. She swept away, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and unspoken judgment. The table fell silent. Lily picked at her napkin. Noah's excitement had dimmed considerably. Across the terrace, Marcus remained absorbed in his VIP bubble, laughing and toasting, completely unaware or willfully ignorant that his fiancée was treating his family like second-class citizens. Elijah leaned over to Noah. Hey, buddy, want to know a secret? Noah nodded, his eyes wide. The best food at any party is whatever you enjoy most. Doesn't matter if it's truffle risotto or chicken nuggets. If it makes you happy, it's the best. He winked. And between you and me, I'd take a good burger over fancy fish eggs any day. Noah giggled, some of his sparkle returning. But I saw the way Elijah's gaze tracked Vanessa across the terrace, the way his jaw set just slightly tighter. My husband was many things, patient, observant, slow to anger. But he was also fiercely protective. And someone had just insulted his children. I had a feeling Vanessa had no idea what she just set in motion. What happens next will shock you. The party had reached its peak around 8:30, but at our table, I was halfway through trying to distract the kids with conversation when I noticed Lily's empty chair. My daughter had excused herself to the restroom 15 minutes ago. The knot in my stomach tightened like a fist. I stood, scanning the crowd for her dark hair, her vintage Burberry cardigan, the one I'd found at an estate sale, pristine condition, better quality than anything in Vanessa's designer closet. Then I saw her. Lily was walking back toward our dark corner, but something was terribly wrong. Her shoulders were hunched forward, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Even from here, I could see the redness around her eyes, the way she was blinking too fast, trying not to cry. She slid into her chair, without looking at me. Lily. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. Honey, what happened? She shook her head, her jaw clenched tight. That's when I knew it was bad. Lily didn't cry easily. She was too much like me, holding everything in until it shattered. Sweetheart, talk to me. Her voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. Can we just go home? My heart broke into pieces. What happened? Some kids. She swallowed hard, fighting tears. There were these girls by the bathroom. They were maybe 13 or 14 and they pointed at my shoes. I looked down at her feet. The suede Mary Janes, soft gray, classic silhouette, worn but beautifully maintained. I'd bought them at a vintage boutique in Portland because they were real quality, the kind that lasts for generations. They said. Lily's voice cracked, and my heart shattered. They said I was wearing poor person shoes. They asked if we got them from a donation bin because they looked so old and pathetic. The rage that flooded through me was white-hot and instantaneous. My 10-year-old daughter, my sensitive, brilliant girl who reads 4 grades above her level and volunteers at the wildlife rescue every weekend, mocked. For shoes. I reached for her hand, but before I could say anything, I heard the click of heels on stone. Vanessa materialized at our table, like a shark scenting blood. Oh dear, is everything all right? Her voice dripped with false concern, pitched just loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Several guests turned to look, champagne flutes pausing mid-sip. We're fine, I said flatly. Are you sure? Because Lily looks upset. Vanessa tilted her head, her expression a practiced mask of sympathy. Did something happen? I opened my mouth, but Lily spoke first, her voice small and broken. Some girls made fun of my shoes. Vanessa's eyes flicked down to Lily's suede Mary Janes, and I saw it, that microsecond of satisfaction before she arranged her face into understanding. Oh, sweetheart. She crouched down, putting herself at Lily's eye level in a performance of compassion. You know, children here are raised differently. Their parents are CEOs, venture capitalists. These kids are being groomed for Princeton, for Wharton. They have very refined standards. My fingers curled into fists under the table. Vanessa continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone. Honestly, Diana, I've been worried about this. The children, they're not used to, well, to being in environments like this. Living so isolated up in Maine, without regular exposure to proper social settings. She sighed, shaking her head like a disappointed teacher. It causes culture shock. They don't understand the expectations here. The words hung in the air like poison. She wasn't defending Lily. She was defending the bullies. Maybe next time, Vanessa said, standing and smoothing her dress, you could prepare them better? Make sure their clothing is more appropriate for the occasion? It would save everyone the awkwardness. The crowd was watching now. I could feel their eyes on us, on my children, judging. Vanessa's implication was crystal clear. This is your fault, Diana. You brought your backwoods children to a place they don't belong, dressed them like charity cases, and now everyone's uncomfortable. I was shaking. I wanted to scream. To tell her exactly what I thought of her and her refined standards. To drag her outside but I was frozen. Because Marcus was here, somewhere in this crowd, and he was my brother. My only sibling. If I made a scene, if I caused chaos at his engagement party, I'd be the villain in this story. The jealous sister who couldn't handle her brother's success. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the stone. Vanessa's smile widened, victorious. She thought she'd won. Then Elijah stood. The change in him was immediate and terrifying. Gone was the gentle, soft-spoken man who'd spent dinner quietly eating pasta. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stood to his full height, moving with the kind of controlled precision that made people instinctively step back. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, one hand adjusting the button of his jacket, that same jacket that fit him like it had been custom-made, and the silence spread outward like ripples in water. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses stopped clinking. The music seemed to fade. Elijah didn't look at Vanessa.
He looked at me.
His dark eyes were calm, cold, and completely focused. There was a question in them, one we'd asked each other 1,000 times in our 14 years together. Have you had enough? It was the same look he gave me the day I told him about the harassment at my old job. The same look before he quietly made a phone call that resulted in my former boss being investigated by federal regulators. Elijah didn't make threats.
He didn't need to.
I thought about Lily's red-rimmed eyes. About Noah's confusion when he couldn't try the appetizers. About being shoved into a dark corner while Vanessa paraded around in a dress that cost more than our car. I thought about my brother, who I'd driven 5 hours to celebrate, who hadn't once come to check on us. I looked at Elijah and nodded once. The decision was made. Vanessa's smile faltered as she realized something had fundamentally shifted. She took a small step back, her eyes darting between us, suddenly uncertain. Elijah's expression didn't change. He reached down, helping Lily out of her chair with infinite gentleness, then did the same for Noah. "We're leaving," I said, my voice steady now. And in that moment, with my husband's silent strength at my back and my children's hands in mine, I chose their dignity over my brother's party. I chose us. But what happened next? You won't believe it. Several nearby conversations paused. I could feel the attention shifting toward us, the whispers starting like a gathering storm. Vanessa's uncertainty evaporated instantly, replaced by barely concealed triumph. She straightened, that megawatt smile returning full force. "You know what? I think that's probably the smartest decision you could make right now." Her voice carried, projecting to the growing audience of guests pretending not to stare. "This is my house, after all. Mine and Marcus's. I have to maintain a certain image. For our business partners. Our investors." She emphasized those last words, letting them land like stones. My house. The claim hung in the air, territorial and absolute. She wasn't just dismissing us. She was evicting us from her domain, like we were trespassers who'd overstayed our welcome. I was gathering Lily's small purse when I caught it, a flicker of something on Elijah's face. Not anger. Not indignation. A smirk. It was gone in an instant, so quick I almost thought I imagined it, but I knew my husband. I'd seen that expression exactly 3 times in our marriage. Once before he negotiated a hostile takeover that saved a failing conservation project. Once before he systematically exposed a competitor who'd tried to steal his research. And once before he outbid a corporate developer for protected wetlands just to prove a point. It was the look of a man who'd been handed exactly what he wanted. "Diana? Diana?" Marcus's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. He was pushing through the guests, his face flushed and confused, his bow tie slightly askew. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes from trying to maintain appearances all night. "What's going on?" He reached our table, eyes darting between me and Vanessa. "Why are you guys leaving already? You just got here." Vanessa immediately shifted gears, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of wounded innocence. "Oh, Marcus, honey, it's not, Diana said she wanted to leave. I think she's just not comfortable here. The atmosphere isn't really." She trailed off delicately, letting him fill in the blanks. The implication was clear. "Your sister doesn't fit in with our crowd." Marcus's face crumpled with guilt and confusion. "Diana, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to feel." He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in stressed peaks. "Maybe you should take the kids back to your hotel? Let them rest? You must be exhausted from the drive, and—"
He was apologizing. To me.
For Vanessa's behavior. And he had no idea. None. My brother, standing in this estate's grand courtyard, surrounded by marble and imported flowers and crystal, actually believed he lived here. Believed this was his home, his party, his life. He had no clue that every piece of furniture he was lounging on, every room he was hosting in, every inch of this partnership with Vanessa existed because Elijah had decided to be generous 4 years ago. Marcus thought he was the host, the master of the house. In reality, he was a tenant whose lease was about to expire. "It's fine, Marcus," I said quietly, slipping my arm around Lily's shoulders. "We'll get out of your way." No, it's not." He was flustered now, aware that people were watching, that this didn't look good. "You came all this way. I wanted you to be here." "Marcus, sweetheart." Vanessa touched his arm, her voice honey-sweet. "Let them go. Diana clearly wants to leave, and we have guests to attend to." The Harringtons were asking about the investment timeline, and she was steering him away, redirecting his attention like she always did. Marcus's shoulders sagged in defeat. He shot me one more apologetic look before allowing himself to be led back toward the center of the party, toward the lights and the laughter and the people who mattered in Vanessa's world. Elijah was silent beside me, helping Noah into his jacket with methodical care. But I saw it again, that tiny quirk at the corner of his mouth when Vanessa said my house. "Elijah," I murmured as we started toward the entrance. "Not yet," he said softly. His voice was calm, almost pleasant, but there was something underneath it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We were almost to the grand foyer when Vanessa's voice rang out behind us, bright and performative. "Drive safely. And Diana, maybe next time, let us know if you need recommendations for the children's clothing. I know some wonderful boutiques that aren't too expensive." The laughter that followed was polite but present. Several guests were openly watching now, champagne flutes in hand, entertained by the drama unfolding before them. Lily's hand tightened in mine. I felt her entire body tense. Elijah stopped walking. He didn't turn around, didn't react visibly. But something shifted in the air, a change in pressure, like right before a thunderstorm breaks. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The motion was casual, unhurried. He tapped the screen a few times, scrolling through something. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the marble foyer, cutting through the whispers like a blade. "Before we go, there's something I need to discuss with Marcus." The room went quiet. The music seemed to fade. Even the servers stopped moving. Vanessa's smile froze on her face. "I'm sorry, what?" Elijah finally turned, and the look on his face was pleasant. Professional. The expression of someone about to discuss a minor contractual detail. "Marcus," he called out. "Could you come here for a moment? It's about the house." My brother emerged from the crowd again, now looking completely bewildered. "The house? What about?" "The lease," Elijah said simply. "I wanted to give you proper notice in person, since we're all here together." Marcus blinked. "Notice? What notice?" And just like that, the trap sprang shut. "You need to hear what happens next." The party noise seemed to fade into a dull hum as Elijah stepped forward. There was something fundamentally different about him now. The quiet, amiable writer had vanished, replaced by someone who moved with the confidence of a man who'd spent decades in boardrooms where millions changed hands with a signature. "Marcus," Elijah said, his voice low but carrying an authority that made several nearby guests turn their heads. "Do you remember the name of the parent company on the lease you signed?" My brother blinked, confusion replacing the embarrassment that had been written across his face moments before. What? Why would that matter right now?" "Just answer the question," Elijah said, his tone patient but unyielding. Marcus's forehead creased as he searched his memory. "I think it's Ironwood Properties. Honestly, I don't remember the details. I just signed through the agent 4 years ago. Is there a problem with the property management or something?" The corner of Elijah's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. He pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward Marcus. "Read it. Out loud." Marcus leaned forward, squinting at the illuminated text. His lips moved silently at first. Then his voice emerged, shaky and confused. Internal Directive, dated March 2021. From E. Brooks, Chairman. Subject: Chin account exception. He paused, his face going pale. Approve exception for Marcus Chen's residential file. Freeze 2021 rental rates indefinitely, regardless of market adjustments. Any difference between frozen rate and current market value to be accounted for in Chairman's Family Charity Adjustment account. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the string quartet seemed to sense something monumental happening and let their music trail off, plunging the terrace into a deadly stillness. I don't. Marcus's voice cracked. What does this mean? Vanessa had gone utterly still beside him, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. I watched as understanding began to dawn on her face, slowly at first, then all at once, like watching ice crack across a frozen lake. It means, Elijah said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet gathering, that the luxurious lifestyle you've been enjoying for the past 4 years has been subsidized. Heavily subsidized. He paused, letting the words sink in. The market rate for this property is currently $4,500 per month. You've been paying $2,900, the frozen 2021 rate. That's a difference of $1,600 per month. $19,200 per year. Over 4 years. That's $76,800 in effective charity. Marcus staggered backward as if he'd been physically struck. No, that's not. I can afford this place. I make good money. You make a good salary, Elijah corrected gently. But you're not wealthy, Marcus. You're what financial advisors call a Henry, high earner, not rich yet. You spend everything you make trying to maintain an image that's beyond your actual means. Without the subsidy, you couldn't afford this address. You certainly couldn't afford it while also funding those Mediterranean vacations and the luxury car lease and the country club membership Vanessa insisted on. I watched my brother's face crumble. Watched him realize that every dismissive comment Vanessa had made about people who don't understand quality, every sneering remark about knowing your place in the world, all of it had been built on a foundation of charity. Charity from the man she'd been mocking all evening. Elijah turned to Vanessa, whose face had transformed from its usual haughty composure into something raw and exposed. You're right about one thing, Vanessa. Class cannot be faked. His voice was quiet now, but it carried like thunder. Real class isn't about designer labels or knowing which fork to use or making sure everyone sees your expensive jewelry. Real class is about character, about how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you. He paused, letting his words sink in. Around us, the gathered guests stood transfixed, their cocktails forgotten. The class you've been so proud of for 4 years, this address, this lifestyle, this social standing, it's been funded by my family's charity. Every time you look down on someone for wearing Eddie Bauer instead of Hermes, every time you judge someone's worth by their clothes or their car, you were doing it from a position you didn't actually earn. You were living on borrowed elegance. Vanessa's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved to clean it up. Now, Elijah continued, and his voice took on the crisp, businesslike tone I'd only heard him use during rare phone calls he couldn't avoid. As chairman and majority owner of Ironwood Properties, I am formally notifying you, Marcus Chen, that I am exercising my right of non-renewal as outlined in Section 12, Paragraph 3 of your lease agreement. Your current lease expires on the 30th of next month. You have exactly 30 days to secure alternative housing that aligns with your actual budget. The property transition process will proceed according to Connecticut state law and the terms of your contract. Elijah, please. Marcus's voice broke. You can't just... I'm not evicting you, Elijah said, and there was almost kindness in his voice now. That would be cruel and unnecessary. I'm simply declining to renew your lease at the end of its natural term, which is my legal right as the property owner. 30 days is more than sufficient time to find appropriate housing. I'd suggest looking at the developments off Route 9. Nice places, good schools nearby, much more aligned with your actual income bracket. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, those same khaki pockets Vanessa had mocked earlier for being tragically suburban, and reached for my hand. As for the question of whose house this is, he said, glancing at Vanessa with something that might have been pity, I think we've established that definitively. But don't worry, you have 30 days to enjoy it. I'd suggest you make the most of them. The crowd parted as we moved toward the entrance. Everyone suddenly very interested in their shoes or their drinks or anything other than meeting our eyes. I could feel their stares on our backs, could practically hear the mental recalculations happening as they reassessed everything they'd assumed about the quiet couple in the practical clothes. At the door, Marcus caught up to us, his face streaked with tears. Elijah, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know you were. Elijah paused, turning back. His hand came up to rest on Marcus's shoulder, not unkindly, but firm. I know you didn't. That was intentional. But Marcus, you need to understand something. Your value as a person has nothing to do with this address or that car or any of it. When you figure out where your true worth lies, when you can see it in yourself without needing these expensive props to prove it, then we'll talk. Really talk. But until then, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped outside, and I drew in a deep breath that felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. Behind us, the estate glowed with warm light, but the warmth was deceptive. I could still feel the chill of judgment that had permeated every corner. Lily's hand squeezed mine as we walked toward the car. Mama, are we leaving without saying goodbye? Sometimes, sweetheart, I told her, the bravest goodbye is the one you don't say out loud. She nodded, resting her head against my side as Elijah opened the car doors. Noah climbed in, already chatting about how hungry he was and whether we could stop for burgers on the way back. Real burgers, the kind Elijah loved. The kind that didn't pretend to be anything other than good. As we pulled away, the estate shrank in the rearview mirror, all that glass and stone glowing like a stage set after the actors have gone home. Behind those walls were people scrambling, reputations recalculating, alliances shifting, truths settling uncomfortably into place. But inside our car, there was only quiet relief. Elijah reached over and squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing the jade earring my mother once told me symbolized integrity. He caught my eye and smiled, the gentle, familiar smile that had nothing to do with boardrooms or leverage or power. Milkshakes, he asked the kids. Yes. Noah cheered. Lily smiled too, small but genuine. Chocolate, please. As the road stretched out before us, I realized something profound. Wealth can buy chandeliers and champagne and crowds that clap on cue, but it can't buy grace, and it can't buy love. Those are earned in quieter places. At kitchen tables. On long drives. In moments when you choose dignity over approval. And as the night carried us home, I knew we already had everything that mattered.